All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so excited to introduce today's guest. She is a friend of mine who I actually connected with and met through the Mama Gina community. So this is going to be a super pleasurable, fun, juicy conversation that we're going to have today. And please welcome Ellie Shepley Montgomerie. And I'll do a quick introduction, and then I'm going to have Ellie share her story, and we'll go from there. We have some really fun, exciting things to talk about today. So Ellie is a pleasure and intimacy expert and co-founder of her company, Desire on Fire. Through her retreats and programs, she teaches hundreds of women how to create wild, confident intimacy, orgasmic bliss, and fulfilling relationships. She's personally trained with some of the top intimacy and sexuality teachers in the world, including Mama Gina herself. Let's see, Nicole Daedone.
They don't, yeah.
Daedone. Okay, and she's the founder of the worldwide movement of Orgasmic Meditation. That sounds super fun. And Allison Armstrong, who has been hand-selected by Tony Robbins as his top platinum members coach, teaching them and coaching them on relationships. And together with her business partner, Amy Batuski, she has created a remarkable sisterhood of women who allow their desires and pleasure to lead the way as they step into a whole new world of freedom, manifestation, and ease. So welcome, Ellie. I'm so excited to have you on here. I feel like when we met, we just super bonded like really quick. And I love that we have very similar topics and the things that we are passionate about and coach on, and it's so needed in our world, especially right now with the patriarchy being shown for what it is, women in sisterhood coming together to rise the fuck up together and really get to stand in our own power and pleasure, because that is really what it's going to take for us to change the world as we know it now for future generations. So I'm really excited to have you on today to get to share your expertise and how you help women heal their relationship to themselves, and for all of us to get to stand in our pleasure and our power. So thank you for being here today. And I'd love for you to kind of softly introduce yourself and share some of your story of how you got to where you are today, so that people can get to know you a little bit more, and then we can dive into the rest.
Oh, thank you so much, Nicole. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you for having me on. I just so admire the work that you do and how you support women in business and to embody this feminine approach in business. It's so, so important and needed during this time. So it's an honor to be here sharing my experience. And yeah, it's, I am an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur basically since I was 18 years old, essentially. I started with creating a thrift store at my college. And I then went on to build a network marketing team and business, and worked really hard, through my 20s, like really wanted to be self-supporting. I was nannying, I was catering, I was living in New York City, just like really wanted to be my own boss, have my own business. And I did do that, through my 20s. I built this business. And by the time I reached my mid 20s, I was completely burned out and really not living in alignment with my authentic expression and my desires and my pleasure. I had created, a certain amount of financial success, which was, exciting. But at the expense of, my body, my well-being, my mental health.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that this manifested is that I was really struggling in my dating life. And, I was doing a lot of personal growth work around my business and, I had great relationships with my family and, friendships, but I would go out on dates and I just felt so frozen. And like, yeah, frozen, like it wasn't working. I was like, what is wrong with these guys? I actually thought it was about the guys. Like, I was like, guys in New York suck. Like, I just blamed it on the guys. Like, I didn't really think that it had anything to do with me. But the main thing that really bugged me, and the thing that had me go like, maybe there is something for me to look at, is that I could not climax. We're just gonna go right into talking.
Let's go there.
Yeah, I couldn't climax. And, you know, I was such a like achiever performer in the rest of my life. And this was an area where like, I really wanted to perform. Like, I wanted to be like a good woman. I wanted to be able to climax. I wanted to, you know, it wasn't even about my pleasure. It was just like, because it was like the guy wanted that, you know, to happen. So I was like, I want that to happen. And I couldn't get there. And I used vibrators and that kind of worked, but that was like, you know, it was like not great. The guy would be like, what? Like, you know? So that honestly is what started me on this feminine journey. Had I been able to climax easily, I don't think I would be here, which is kind of wild how wise our bodies are.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm just so grateful now. I'm like, thank you to my body, who was just so wise and was like, you know, had this, you know, like, I just feel very guided, even though at the time it felt really frustrating. And so I was in New York, and I finally discovered personal growth work that was not just focused on business and, you know, my other relationships. It was focused on intimacy, pleasure, sensuality, this whole world that I had not put any attention on up until this point. And I discovered Mama Gina. I discovered this practice called Orgasmic Meditation that really changed my life and helped me build a connection to my body, my pleasure, helped me learn to thaw out, because that's what I discovered, is that I had this like masculine shell, you know, and I was so frozen and guarded. And I'd had, you know, traumatic experiences like so many of us have had, you know, in college and with guys, and I was just guarded, without even really being aware of it. And so over time, I did a lot of healing, and I really learned to start with my own relationship with myself and my own body. Because that's what I've learned, is that no one can give to me what I can't give to myself. So I had to learn, like, okay, if I want to be able to have an orgasm with a guy in bed, like, I need to be able to have an orgasm with myself and like treat myself like my own lover. So that's been like a 5-year journey now. And it's like peeling back the layers of the onion. I never expected to be doing this for work. I thought I was very happy in what I was doing. Like, you know, I did not, you know, I had no like real further aspirations. It was just like, I want to be really successful in the business I was doing. And my goddess had a different plan for me. And thank God. And yeah, over time, I've just stepped more and more into my true soul's work, which is guiding women in their own journeys around intimacy and pleasure and sensuality and relationships. I ended up through this journey meeting my husband, Rob, who has really been my, you know, partner on this path and in this work. And it's just beyond my wildest dreams, you know, the relationship and the level of intimacy and feeling seen and feeling, you know, appreciated and connected. And I know that none of that would be possible. You know, it's like, I've become the woman who could have that, who could let that in. And he's wonderful. And I'm very clear that, you know, I'm showing up just so differently than I ever had before. So yeah, so that's a little bit about my journey and my story. And yeah, so I lead retreats for women. Before COVID happened, I was leading, you know, 30 women in-person retreats several times a year. They're all about, oh my God, they're so fun. I lead them with my friend Amy, who's also a Mama Gina graduate, and it's experiential and we coach and we you know, we have guest teachers, they're beautiful in-person experiences. But we have not been able to do that, you know, in the past 7 months, however long it's been. So we've really moved more online, and it's been incredible in a lot of ways, you know, leading virtual experiences. And I think there's never been a more important time for us to do this kind of work. You know, it's like we're seeing that the structure, the masculine, patriarchal, toxic masculine structures are not working. They're crumbling, they're falling apart. And I do believe that we're in a historic period of history where we are creating something new, and it starts within each of us, right? Because it's like like you said so beautifully in the beginning, like reclaiming our feminine, like that's an inside job, and then it can show up in the world. Like we build new structures inside, the world has to reflect that. And so I think each woman and each human, but I work with women, you know, doing that work to undo the conditioning, the lineage, you know, of conditioning, to really own and embody our pleasure and our desires and our divinity and our power. And yeah, just like, I think this is the time, you know, it's like the great pause.
Literally.
Literally. What I was doing before that I could kind of get away with is not working anymore. So yeah, I miss doing it in person, but it's been a real blessing to be able to be of service during this time.
Absolutely. And it's such an important time in leadership, business, and just for women in general, since we're speaking to a mostly female community here. But this factor of intimacy. And I find it interesting because I've seen a lot of a little bit of like misogyny, masculine commentary around like, oh, all these like feminine empowerment coaches that are now, you know, it's like the new like fad. And I'm like there's too many business coaches, you know, it's kind of like this thing. I'm just like, listen, like it's obviously a need and it's a void that women are finally able to get to have the space and the grace to start tapping into this openly, publicly. I really experienced that with Mama Gina, I'm sure as well as you did, of really getting to feel safe being lit up and getting to be fully expressed, because so often as women, we are so used to constricting and contracting and hiding, not saying what we think because we don't want to be seen as a bitch, or not expressing our sexual desires or sexuality because it's slutty or seen as a whore, even if you're just being flirty with the world. And so this work is so important. And I love how you spoke into the more intimate you got with yourself and like really let pleasure and like that unfreezing and the unthawing, or like the thawing out, that literally led you into what you're doing now. And that's really the power of getting to be intimate with ourselves. And I would actually love, because I think I remember, and when we had talked before, you had like a very interesting way that you met your husband and like how you two ended up, it was like a quick kind of thing. So I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing that story. I really like, I remember it being like, oh, that's so cool. Because I think that's a big part of trusting yourself too, because some people would have a lot of like, I'm not being rational, or like a status, you know, just like a norm that so many women try and live by, to be normal, to be, I'm doing the right thing, or I'm checking the boxes. Whereas when you really learn to trust yourself and let pleasure guide, it can take you to the most maybe uncomfortable or like unreasonable places, but also the most pleasurable and the most expanding. So if you feel comfortable sharing that story, I would love for you to share.
Oh my God, it's my favorite story to share. I'm thrilled you asked.
Yes.
So yeah, totally, you know, everything you just said. And when I met my husband, you know, like I said, I was dating, and I was so stuck because I would go on these dates, and the whole time, all I was thinking was like, is this guy my husband? Is this guy my husband? Is this guy my husband?
You're like, no pressure, but are you my husband?
And then it was like, I was judging, and I couldn't be free. I couldn't be expressed. I couldn't be present, you know, there was no room. And it was like, does he check the boxes? Is he XYZ? No. And I would know immediately, but you know, but I also didn't have the boundaries or the clarity or the connection to the permission to follow that inner voice to be like, oh, this isn't a fit. Like, I'm going to leave before I have 3 drinks with you. You know, it was just not a fun time. So what happened is I started working with a coach, and the coach challenged me to date. Like, she was like, you need to practice just dating and like being present and not immediately picturing your furniture in the guy's apartment.
You're like, I don't know if I can do that. I love
well,
it.
I was like, challenge accepted, you know, because I started the intimacy work. So I was starting to get it and like see my patterns and be like, yeah, this really isn't serving me. I mean, before, what led me to that work is I actually was in a relationship for a year where I really wasn't vulnerable for like an entire year. I just like waited for the guy to be vulnerable. And then at the end, we finally started getting real, and it was like, we wanted totally different things. We were not on the same page, and it ended like immediately. I was like, wow, I just suffered for a year feeling so stuck, like so like confused. So I'd started the intimacy work, and I really wanted to break these patterns and like learn new patterns and learn how to connect. That was it. I was practicing being intimate and vulnerable without picturing my furniture in the guy's apartment.
I love it.
Like, I'm going to be connected, I'm going to be vulnerable, but it doesn't need to go anywhere. Like, it's just for the sake of connection. So that's the space that I was in when I met my husband. And my husband is 14 years older than me. He lived at the time in Cape Town, South Africa, which could not be further from New York. We met in New York. He was in New York, like visiting for business. And we actually met I was taking these courses, and it was a course on healing. And he was there because he's a coach as well. And he had discovered this, you know, they don't even exist anymore, the company that was doing the courses that we met through, but he discovered it in London. Doesn't really matter. But in any case, we met at this healing course, and I immediately thought he was like super hot, and we started connecting, and you know, I find out he's, you know, he was 40, I was 26 at the time, and he was from Cape Town, and he was kind of like a bad boy. Like, he would tell me these stories of like, you know, his like party days, and just in my mind, it wasn't going anywhere. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, oh, Rob, like, he's super hot, but like, he's like kind of a playboy, he felt like to me. Like, and he, the whole time, was like creating that image because he had his own like commitment issues. So, but we were practicing the tools we were learning. So we were practicing being real, practicing being vulnerable. Like, on our first date, you know, I was practicing being real. So I was like, the check came, we went out to dinner, and the check came, and I was like, normally I offer to pay because I think that I should, but you know, this is always like an awkward point for me in dates because like I want the guy to pay, but I feel like I should offer, and then I offer, but it's like not really authentic because I think he's a jerk if he doesn't offer to pay, you know.
Right.
I just like called myself out on the whole thing that I was stuck in, and it opened up this beautiful conversation, and he was like, I'm so glad you brought that up. Like, I always pay, and then I get it, you know, my pattern is I get into relationships with women where I'm always paying and I get resentful. And, you know, so we had this beautiful connection, and those are the kind of like real conversations that we were having. And then he left, he went back to Cape Town, and we just kept in touch. And yeah, he ended up coming back to New York. And we just again, we were having these like deep, vulnerable connections. We were having amazing sex. We were practicing orgasmic meditation together, which
Awesome.
like,
I love it. I'm like, yes, girl.
yeah, it was like amazing.
Yeah.
But it was like, he was this, you know, just, I was having fun. I was learning. I was like practicing with him, and he was a safe person to practice with, because in my mind, it wasn't, you know, he wasn't my husband.
You didn't have the furniture in there yet.
Not of the furniture. And I would get it. We would talk about it. Like, I would get attached, and then we'd be like, yeah, we're not, you know, he would be like, I live in Cape Town. Like, you know, I'm so much older than you. This is, you know, you don't want to date me. And I'd be like, oh yeah, I know. Like, I'm in this practice. I'm not dating anyway. Meanwhile, we were completely falling in love with each other.
You guys are like, we're good, but
Like, this isn't going anywhere.
yeah.
And we, the teacher that I ended up doing my coach training with and studying with for many years, Nicole, who you know, brought really orgasmic meditation to the mainstream and was teaching it. She was leading a coaching circle. And I didn't know anything about her yet. I had never experienced her work. But, you know, we did the healing course. We did another course on desire. And, you know, everyone was like, oh my God, Nicole's coming to New York. You've got to, like, it's going to be amazing. You've got to work with her. And the course was like more money than I'd ever invested in myself. And Rob, it wasn't even on my radar really as something to do. People were talking about it, but Rob came to me and was like, do you want to do this course? Like, I think I want to do this. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I totally do. But like, I can't afford it. And like, I asked him to pay for part of it, which was a huge edge. And we ended up doing it together. And the night before, we then spent like a week together. And that's when it got really deep. You know, we were having these, like, we just really fell in love that week. Like, officially. Yeah. And the night before the circle, we did have a conversation where I was like, well, like, what are we doing? You know, like, what is this? And he essentially was like, well, I've never met anyone like you. Like, I've never felt so connected to a woman before. And that's when I was like, oh, like, I didn't know that he felt that. But still, you know, we weren't fully going there. And we get to the course, and everyone's like, you need to know what you want. You know, you need to, like, know why you're doing this and what you want and, like, what you want to get out of it. And you need to, like, be clear on that. And I was like, what do I want? You know, like, I want my business to grow, but I don't, you know, that's kind of happening. Like, I don't know. And so I'm on my way to the first, it was a coaching circle. You know, there were like 30 other people in it, and it was a weekend course. And we're on our way there, walking there for the first circle. And I picture myself walking down the aisle with, you know, with Rob. Like, it had this like flash image come in, and I was like, Ellie, you know, like, stop. Like, you have this like obsession with, like, you know, getting married and the Disney princess, and like, it's your conditioning. And
it's just a common thing.
Exactly. But I'm like, just, you know, I was just trying to like not do that.
Yeah.
So, and then I like, whatever, let it go. And I sit down in the circle. And we were like seated together halfway through. So, you know, half the people got coached before us. And people were talking about like going into their darkness. You know, that was a lot of this work, and is this work, right? The feminine work, like shadow and looking at your darkness. And that was new. That was a new conversation for me. Like, I was a yogi. I was like love and light all the way. Like, I had never even thought about like it would be valuable to look at my shadow and go down into the basement and like see what's there. I was just like, yeah, I want to be love and light, you know, like, I'm going to save the world. My company was called Wellness Warriors. You know, I'm like, yes, that was like my whole thing. but I'm sitting there and I'm like, wow, you know, I resonated with what was being shared. So when it came to me, you know, the question we were each answering was like, what do you want? That's how it started. And so I said, I want to practice, like, I think it was like living in alignment with my darkness, you know, with my darker, with my truth, with my desires. And Nicole, the teacher, looked at me and she said, okay, well, let's see about that. And she pointed to Rob and she goes, is that your partner? And I said, no. And then I was like,
yes,
well,
but no.
like, sort of, we're figuring it out. And she goes, do you want to marry him?
She put you on the spot.
Marry him? And I go, uh-huh. And she was like, okay. She goes, why do you want to marry him? And I said, I think I said, like, he's amazing. And she said, well, what's amazing about him? And I said, he sees me, he gets me, he nails me. Because he's very, very penetrating, my husband. Like, he just doesn't let me get away with, like, all the bullshit I used to do, like wearing the mask and like being the good girl. And he like wants like real me. And it was like really foreign to me at first. You know, I've grown into the woman who can like meet it. It was scary to me in the beginning and kind of really confronting and kind of annoying at times, but there was obviously a part of me that liked it. And so, yeah, so that, and then she said, she goes, what do you want your marriage to be about? And I said, I think I said, at first I said something really like up here. And, you know, I was like, go global transformation or like something. And she was like, you know, what do you want your marriage to be about? And I was like, she was like, what does it say? You know, she's like, drop in, like, what is it, you know, what does your body say essentially? And I was like trying to drop in and I was like, you know, I can't really hear the answer over the sensation because I was like feeling so much. That, well, what does the sensation say? And I was like, love and power, which is totally what our marriage is about. It's like love and power. You know, like finding my power and supporting each other's true, you know, authentic power. And so, yeah. And then she went on and she was like, who's going to move?
I love it. She's just like, let's go there.
Like, who's going to move? And I was like, he is. And she said, when? And I said, the fall, because this was July. And so I'm like, the fall. And she goes, when? And I said, now. Like, that was totally the reasonable answer, was the fall, you know? And then, yeah, there was more, but that was the gist of it. And he's sitting there the whole time. Is this okay that I'm going on this long?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm like, let's hear it, girl. Yes.
So he's sitting there the whole time, you know, and this is a man who never thought he was going to get married. I mean, he's 40, he's never been married, like was never interested in getting married. Or maybe was at one point, but had decided like, I don't really think that's for me. He was just out of a, you know, unhealthy relationship as well. And so he's sitting there and essentially what it was like is from what he says is that he could so feel, I mean, I was so clear in my desire, like so clear, so dropped in, just like the things that I said, you know, it was coming from this deep place. And it was really the first time that I had allowed for that level of truth to come through, right? Like just connected to that, like my body's truth and allowed it to come out. And it felt so safe, you know, in that environment. And so he's like, yeah, I mean, it was like amazing to hear. and I had all of my conditioning, you know, and she did a great job, you know, the coach. And she just said, you know, I don't remember, but it was essentially like, you know, so what are you going to do? And she kind of expertly guided him through all the things. And at one point he's like, I don't believe in the word marriage, you know? And each time he would try to go down a road like that, she'd be like, okay, like what, you know? And he was like, what are your parents gonna think? Because my parents, you know, this was not now they love him, you know, it's all worked out. But part of my journey with this whole thing was rocking the boat, because I had been the good girl, you know, my whole life. Like I worked with my mom in network, you know, I worked with my mom in network marketing. Like I'm on her team, you know, like I had just worked so like, just like this with my mom, but never had differentiated, like never had done anything my parents didn't approve of in my life. Like that is the extreme level to which I was the good girl. So this was like, you know, I was in my Saturn return, which in astrology is where you like really individuate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was designed, you know, the whole thing to rock that family system and have me like really separate from my mom, even though it was painful. So they were like pretty disturbed by the whole thing. Like he and I had known each other 2 months at this point.
Yeah, your parents are like, wait, what?
Like he's, you know, not, it's from another cut, like just the whole thing. They were like, so yeah, so he was like, what are your parents gonna think? And then at one point he looked at me and he's like, okay, you want to do this? And Nicole, the teacher, was like, you ask her in a way she'll remember.
She's like, don't fuck it up.
You're not fucking this up.
Yeah.
So he gets down on one knee, and it was the sweetest thing, because we were kind of laughing, like there was just so much sensation. And then he like put his head in my lap, and someone handed him a ring, like, you know, just to use for the proposal. And he puts his head in my lap, and then he looked up at me and said, will you be my wife?
I love it. I love it.
Married ever since. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like, you know, we kissed or whatever, and then we finally sat back down. The whole class was like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
We finally sat back down, and I looked at him and I was like, I love you. Like, I love you too. Like we hadn't said I love you. Like we hadn't even talked about, I mean, we hadn't talked about anything, you know, we hadn't considered really a future together. But it really, and this is what I believe is like, when it's connected to true desire, which is what I got connected to, you know, and I had never been really connected to that in my life. Like it was just the truth. It was just there. And it's just really, ever since then, that is how I've been able to show up in the relationship, you know, like really staying clear in because I'm really clear, like that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have asked for it. Like that man would never have proposed to me. And I'm not saying everyone should do this, you know, like we're all on our, you know, this is like, it's every situation is different. And I'm just like, wow, how many opportunities do I miss out on because I don't get real and I'm not willing to be out there about what I really want. And our marriage, like the man, Rob he loves being married. Like it's hilarious. Like he just loves it. And I'm like, wow, I just never would have claimed that without this kind of work and without permission from other women. And I think that is so key. You know, it's like, that's what I got from Nicole and Mama Gina and like all of these women who have gone before us. And what I continue to get from other women in this work is just like permission, because the world doesn't give us that. right? The world teaches us like, be low maintenance and like be a cool girl and, you know, don't ask for too much and don't want too much and that it's shameful and that it's embarrassing and like on and on and on. And my experience has been that it's actually the opposite. Like the only way that I can live a life that is really what I want is to be like fierce in creating that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's partially why I wanted you to share that story too, is because it's such a fun story, but mostly it's like that piece, that authenticity and alignment piece that we aren't given permission to be, because especially from the feminine, it can seem irrational. It can seem outrageous or too much or too sensitive or all of these things. But if and when we learn how to drop in that deep and actually trust ourselves and our desires, that's where the magic and the miracles happen. And like you said, like had you not been able to drop in that way, you wouldn't have had that experience. And I love that you get to bring this work to women, especially in relationships, because a lot of women are up here in the like love and line, all like this like princessy kind of land where Prince Charming's going to come save them, and they're putting the furniture in the house before they are dating someone, you know, like, but it's from a different place. It's from this like almost like magical thinking place, which our imagination's great, but it's not our deep desires. Those deep desires are like those soul pulling you forward, like I know this is my truth. And that's such a different place to go into any relationship, whether it's a job interview, the person at the coffee stand, like how you treat people and how you show up is so different. And that's why the work that you do is so powerful, because it teaches women how to drop in so much deeper and have the relationships that they really want. So again, coming back to what you talked about having, what's your intention?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you want to get out of this? Like, why are you here? And it's not to like get so stuck on an outcome, but like, how do I want to show up in this? And what are the things that I am hoping to get out of it? And I mean, just thinking about all the dating coaches that I follow and watch, they're like, oh, here's text messages to send the guy when he tries to bail, or like, you know, it's like, that's great, but like, it needs to be more than that. It needs to be a woman owning her pleasure, her desires, her truth, so that when she shows up and it's not the right guy, she also knows that too. And she's not trying to put the furniture in the house with someone that's like really not in alignment with her.
Well, and I know. And we've been taught to go after these markers of success, you know, like the wedding and the house and the kids. And it's like, those things are all beautiful. There's nothing wrong at all with those things. But I mean, the number one thing I've learned from working with women is like, if you end up with the guy and the house and the kids, and it's not what you really want, and you've built something that is not based on desire, it's a hellish thing to like pick that up, you know, to like take that apart and then rebuild it. And some people, that's their journey. I mean, Glennon Doyle wrote, have you read Untamed?
Oh, it's amazing. It's so good.
If you're listening to this and you haven't read Untamed, like just
it's a must read.
must read. I read it like a couple months ago. I like cried through the whole thing. And it's a beautiful story about exactly that, you know, and she has recreated her family in this beautiful way. You know, we each have our own journey. And it's like, just if we can get women like young, connecting to their true desires, like creating their lives from true desire, like you can have all the things that you want and have them feel good and aligned, and like they feed your soul. So you don't wake up one day and be like, wait, why did I do all that? Like that didn't make me happy. I mean, I think we've all had that experience at this point in one way or another, like building a whole business or going for a promotion and getting there and being like, wait, I thought that was going to make me happy. Like that did not fill the hole that I thought it was going to fill. So yeah, I
Yeah,
Agreed.
absolutely. And it's a sense of, and Mama Gina spoke to this in Mastery, in her last Mastery that we were both in, but she spoke to this, and I think of it as when people kind of lose themselves. It's a sense of like, I lost myself in that relationship or in that job, or, but it's this piece that as women we aren't taught how to connect to our power. We are taught that our power or our resourcefulness comes from other people. It comes from the man, or a job or a career, or in the way that we look, then we can like get the things. But really it is all inner work. It is all an inside job. And the intimacy piece, I love um, this factor, because especially in leadership, it is so necessary right now, for us as women to step into, like, the more intimate we are, the more powerful we are. And whether it's in relationships with our partner or in our work or just in the world in general, the intimacy piece is just immensely important. And
Oh, the more intimate we are, the more powerful we are.
yeah.
It's so true. Well, and I love that when people say intimacy, like another way to say intimacy is like into me, I see. Like, because I always thought about intimacy as like with another person, like, oh, you're intimate with someone. But totally, like, I wasn't able to be intimate until I could be intimate with myself. Like, guys used to ask me, like, what do you want? Or like, even for dinner, literally, like, what do you want for dinner? What do what do you want? What do you want in bed? And I did not know. And that's just a fundamental, like, lack of connection and understanding and intimacy with myself. And that just came from, like, being a pleaser my whole life and wanting, being codependent, being like the achiever, like basing my worth on what other people thought of me and what I produced. And all that is so embedded in our culture. It's like amazing when women make it out of like the teenage years in our society without that kind of programming.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like starting totally with my relationship with myself and then practicing, like, for me, it always feels, it's gotten a bit easier, but it still often feels like jumping off a cliff, to be really real and say the thing that I'm like, oh, they're gonna think I'm weird, or, like, I work with a business partner and I have real moments, like, especially in the beginning, of jealousy. That would come up, like, she's a total goddess, and like we, which I am too, but it's like, that is so deep in me, the competition and comparing to other women. And so, yeah, like I've had real moments where I've had, like, my growth and my, my intimacy with her is often sharing, like, this is coming up for me. Like, I don't feel as good as you, or I feel like you're a better coach, or you're sexier, when we do our sensual movement dance, like, I envy how you move. And having those real conversations and being willing to have that part of me be seen, and then to feel like I'm loved. It's like, I used to think that would make people hate me or push people away. And it's like, oh, then I get to be seen by her and she gets to share what comes up for her. And, it's so freeing, but it always feels like a death. Like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. I don't want to say this thing. Like,
the ego's like, don't out me out. Don't tell me. Yeah. But that's so important. Yeah, but it's so important. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where it's like getting to be able to trust yourself enough and have a sisterhood and those relationships to get to speak that truth, because then it's not about competing or comparing. It's like getting to see how different, the differences and how you can collaborate and like build each other up. And so there's so much, what I'm hearing, healing in that too, and in being able to be that real with yourself of like, this doesn't feel good and I'm jealous or I'm like feeling less than, but I can trust myself that if I can share this in a safe space with this person that I'm like have that relationship with, that I can actually heal that part of myself that doesn't feel good enough, or that doesn't feel worthy, or feels less than or something. That's really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And I'd love for you to share as we kind of wrap this up, because I feel like we could talk literally like about all the things all day. I'd love for you to share like what you're currently working on, what you got coming up, how people can get a hold of you, where to find you, and yeah, just like how people can work with you and find you and all the things.
Asking. Yeah. So Amy and I are currently leading a pleasure challenge, a 5-day challenge on Facebook to help women connect to their pleasure. And we're doing the first one we've ever done. It ends tomorrow. So we're in like the middle of it right now. And we had 400 women in it. And
How fun.
like, oh my God. Yeah. I mean, and we do like, I'll just tell you a little bit, like we do sensual movement. We do, we give different practices every day to help women connect to their pleasure. And it has been incredible. So we're going to do it again in October. October 12th to 16th is the week. And yeah, it's the experience is $395, but for your group, if anyone listening wants to do it, you can do it for free. And the code is pleasure. So it's thepleasurechallenge.com.
Awesome.
And you can use, it says this on the page, but you use the code pleasure in all caps and it'll take the price to zero. And yeah, it's been really fun. And we'd love to we're just totally trying to make it available, to women in this kind of work and who want it during this time.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. That's going to be amazing. And I'll make sure to list all of your like Instagram and contact information for anyone that's looking for maybe like one-to-one coaching or different opportunities for that. So yeah, awesome. Well, I hope whoever's listening gets to jump in on the next pleasure challenge, because I'm sure it's going to be super juicy and fun. And Ellie, thank you again so much for sharing your expertise and getting to have just being vulnerable and intimate and sharing your journey with this, because it's so important, especially right now, in really feeling safe and grounded in our feminine, and getting to be powerful in that is just so important. So thank you again. And
Me. Oh my
yeah,
God,
absolutely.
so fun. You're such an amazing interviewer.
Well, thank you. All right. And